Hi, everybody. Welcome to Turn Two with Scott and Troy. I'm Scott Kornberg. Awesome episode we've got for you guys today. Special guest Marius Aleksa, who was the Miami Marlins mental skills coach, has gone into a performance advisory group in North Carolina as a process coach. Just an amazing conversation from baseball to Green Berets to swimming to seventh grade teacher. Really excited for you guys to listen in. Here it is.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Turn Two with Scott and Troy. We have a fantastic guest ready for you. He is a former Miami Marlins mental skills coach, but he goes way beyond that with everything that he does for the people that he has impacted, the people that he has been around. Marius, we cannot thank you enough for being on the show. I am so excited to get some insight into what kind of goes into your role and your position and kind of how you got to this point. I guess my first question for you is, can you give us a little introduction onto how you got into professional sports, specifically the Miami Marlins?
Do you want the short version or the long version?
We got time, so I would love the long version.
Okay, long version. Here we go. So I was a collegiate swimmer. I swam at University of Chicago. Um, Despite being a student athlete, I saw myself as a athlete student. That doesn't mean I didn't take my studies seriously, but I like swimming was that vehicle, that thing that I really cared about. And through my swimming career, I didn't achieve the goals that I wanted to. I left college and I felt like I left stuff on the table. I didn't feel like I performed to my potential. And that was a catalyst that really pushed me into coaching and a lot of things that I did afterwards. So after I graduated, I did 2 years of Teach for America. So I taught seventh grade science in Detroit, a lot of life lessons there. It's incredible how much seventh graders can teach you that you can later use working with special operations soldiers, with Major League Baseball players in terms of classroom management, leadership, setting a culture in a classroom. But I did 2 years of Teach for America. And as I was teaching, I was club coaching. I wasn't done with the sport of swimming. I wanted to give back. I wanted to be around the sport. And so I club coached for those 2 years. And when my commitment with Teach for America was over, I decided I wanted to coach full time. And so I volunteered for a year at Ohio State University. And from there, I got a job at University of Utah as an assistant coach and recruiting coordinator. It was through Ohio State and University of Utah that I got exposed to the world of sports psychology and performance psychology. I didn't really know that existed when I was an athlete. I was studying psychology. I was reading books. I was digging into podcasts, just kind of on my own. But I didn't know that there was a field that looked into optimizing performance. But at Ohio State University, at University of Utah, I saw a sports psychologist working with the women's team at Ohio State. We had a mental performance coach that worked with our team at University of Utah. Got more and more interested in it. And after sitting in on a applied sports psychology class at University of Utah, I realized I really wanted to expand my knowledge as a coach. I saw it as something that could round me out as a better coach and serve my athletes even better. As I started my master's in performance psychology, I realized that maybe it wasn't swimming that I enjoyed coaching. It was more athletes and performance. And performance psychology gave me a way to reach other athletes, other performers beyond just my own experience of being a swimmer, because that's kind of how I fell into swim coaching because I had that background. So once I finished the degree, I had the opportunity to go work in the military full time, um, doing performance psychology. And so I was a resilience trainer down at Fort Polk, Louisiana. I enjoyed that job, but I was looking to get even closer to performance. And so from there, I got a job with the Green Berets, based out of Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And I did that for about a year and a half. And that got me even closer to performance work on a day in and day out basis. When I was working with the Green Berets, that's when I got a call from the Miami Marlins. They were looking for a fully embedded, full-time mental skills coach. And I jumped at that opportunity because that gave me an opportunity to work with players like you on a daily basis, be right up there, like as you guys perform with each game, and be able to be side by side with you as you guys go through your journey of trying to be the best players that you can. And so that's how I ended up in professional baseball after a nice and winding journey that led me to exactly where I need to be.
I mean, you could not have been more in depth on that. That is exactly what I wanted to hear. I love hearing all the steps, everything that you kind of went through to lead to where you are. I want you to know, and I want our listeners to know, over the last 3 years of how much you have impacted my life, how much you have helped me mentally, physically, with my relationship with baseball more than anything else. You were truly the backbone of everything that kind of got me to where I am. And so I'm glad that we both got to kind of reach our goals and do it together and try and be the best people that we can because personally what you have told me and what we have talked about, behind closed doors has transcended the game of baseball. It's more than just you were talking about performance. It's more of how to be a good human, how to transcend what you have done in the game and impact those around you and how your energy, your aura affects those people around you, not just on the field, not just in the batter's box, but when you go home, when you're talking to family, when you're interacting with fans, how important everything that you do is. I don't think that it's stated enough in the game of how important your coaching job truly has been. So after your journey, I just wanted to cut in real quick and say, I cannot thank you enough for everything that you've done. I guess my follow-up question before Scott probably has one is the most interesting thing that I think is that you worked with the Green Berets, which is, if anybody knows anything about the military, is one of the highest, what would you say, highest um, group in the military.
Specialization,
I mean,
maybe.
Specialization,
yeah, it's
yes,
the best of the best, top 1%.
exactly. So, what could they teach you as you were going through and you're trying to help them with their performative action going into combat? Life is on the line. What could they teach you, and what did you learn from them when you were working with them at Fort Bragg?
When I look back at my experience working with them, uh, I feel blessed to have had that opportunity. And I also feel like I got more out of it than anything I could have given them. I feel like it really honed me as a coach and really prepared me for my work moving forward, but especially walking into baseball when I had to walk into a major league clubhouse having never really been around the sport and earn players' trust and earn players' respect and do the best job that I could. The reason why I say that is when I worked with them, I realized these guys are absolute studs. They are the best of the best at what they do. And I had to deal with a lot of my own feelings of imposter syndrome of like, what can I teach these guys? Some of these guys that I'm working with have been Green Berets for 10, 12, 15 years, have combat experience, have the leadership experience of, leading their teams for that long. Like, what can I bring to the table? And so what I did is I just leaned into being present and leaned into my curiosity. Just ask them questions from an outside perspective about, hey, I noticed that you did this. What were the decisions that you made? What did you think through to do it this way as opposed to this way? And came to realize that they really valued that. They valued the outside perspective of a civilian that has expertise and knowledge in performance psychology that might use a different language, different verbiage to describe the things that they're already doing. And they didn't need someone to come in and say, "Oh, you need to do it this way, this way, this way." But they valued widening their perspective a little bit. They valued um, seeing like different ideas or different things that I could bring to the table, and that having them figure out how they might apply that or what that might look like for them in their setting. And I think how differently it would have gone if I came in and said, here are the three things that you have to do. Here are the three steps that you have to take. I think I would have been kicked out the door so fast. And instead, I was brought in. I was seen as a valued member of their support, and I still have relationships with some of these guys. We still talk, even though they've gone off and done different things. Um, and so I now carry that with me, right? Like Troy, you have been a baseball player for much longer than I've been doing this job, right? So for me, it wasn't like, hey, I need to come in and tell Troy what to do, but there are questions that I can ask. There's things that I can try to help uncover, blind spots that I can try to shed light on that might help you utilize the experience that you have, the knowledge that you have, and apply it in different ways. And so that's how I try to approach my work now. And it was kind of formed while I was working with the Green Berets, and I was able to continue honing that when I worked with the Marlins.
What are some of those things? And because you mentioned no baseball experience, and you were a fan, we were talking before this, you know
Yeah.
the game, but what are some of those things that you found like, man, now that I'm in a major league clubhouse, I didn't understand X, Y, and Z when I was watching the Cubs or the White Sox growing up in Chicago. What were some of those things you did to kind of learn and maybe meet players like Troy and other Marlins on their level?
I think that's why I leveraged my advantage of not having played baseball, at least at a very high level. Because when I'm talking to a player like Troy, I don't know what it's like to be a lefty standing in the box against someone who's throwing 97. And I don't know that experience myself. And so I have to ask questions.
Hmm.
I have to talk to Troy and gather information about what that experience is like for him. I'm not going to lean on any sort of experiences that I have. And so I feel like it helps put me in this mode where I'm not going to make any sort of assumptions, right? And so I have to ask Troy what that experience is like with him. And then with another player, I have to ask those same questions because I realize his experience might be completely different from Troy's, right? I mean, just from basic level, like Troy's a lefty, a righty's going to have a different experience. They're going to see different pitches. They're going to, their swing's different, all these things. And so to me, it's this constant reminder of ask questions, figure out what their experience is like, figure out what's going through their head, how they're perceiving this experience. And Scott, to your point, that's how I'm able to meet these players where they're at. Um, to answer the other part of your question, I think everyone knows or understands that baseball is a grind, that a 162 game season is very long. I don't think until you're in it, you realize just how long it is. And it instantly gave me so much more respect for the process that these guys put themselves through in order to prepare themselves for every game. And there's like the technical process, right? Of going into the cage every day, going over the scouting reports, having the hitters meeting. But I think there's the other element of, and this is where guys like Troy come into play, where it's just like maintaining that human element of having fun, walking in with a smile on your face when life is going on and you have other concerns and you've got family stuff going on, and still coming into the clubhouse every day and being a great teammate and lifting up your other teammates and maintaining the culture of the clubhouse. And that's really hard to do day in and day out over such a long season. And so having been in it and experiencing that, it's something that you logically knew, but I just have such an appreciation now for it, having gone through 3 seasons of it.
I remember listening to this podcast, and I'm sure you had some interaction with this player, Kyle Stowers, who had really struggled several times in the major leagues until last season. And he talked a lot about mental skills. And that was the turning point for him in a breakout season, the ability to let go of things, the ability to say, you know what, like what I'm doing today is good enough. I can't measure myself against other people's expectations. He talked in this podcast about journaling. It was one of the most interesting things I think I listened to all year long last year. And it was a guy we saw for a long time in AAA who was a great AAA player. And I'm like, he just can't figure it out. And then he did. For somebody like that, how important was that? He had all the skills physically, but was the ability for him to up his game just from a mental perspective and how he was approaching just going to work every day?
Yeah, I think that's a not just a testament to Kyle Stowers and the work that he's put in and the relentless pursuit of getting better and relentless pursuit of just learning about himself. I think that's pretty reflective of the clubhouse that we had last year. That we had a bunch of younger players that just were hungry to get better. They just wanted to learn. And I think we see that a lot where as players are coming up, they can probably rely on a lot of physical attributes, a lot of physical skills. Sometimes that gets them up faster than others. But at a certain point, I think a lot of players hit a a certain level or a point where that might not be enough. And they have to learn about themselves. They have to learn about their strengths. They have to learn about their weaknesses in order to figure out how can I leverage this? How can I make this work for me when you're running into tough obstacles, whether it's a swing adjustment, whether it's the league exposing you, whether it's just certain things aren't working anymore. What can you rely on? What strengths do you have? Is it your curiosity? Is it your growth mindset? Is it your habits that you've built out? Um, and that's why, as Troy knows, that's why I like to start with what have you done in the past that's worked for you? What sort of habits or what sort of actions have you taken that have allowed you to overcome the obstacles that you face? And maybe those won't work exactly to your situation right now, but there's enough clues in there that we can pick up on those or pull apart and then apply them to your current situation, or at least have it be a starting point for where we work from for what you're facing right now. And then if we need to add to that or try out different things, we can, but why not utilize the experience that you have? Why not utilize maybe some skills that you weren't even quite aware of that you did or have, and try to make them work for you at this point of time?
Did
I'm
you
interested. Oh, go
go
ahead,
ahead?
Scott.
Go, no, go ahead, Troy.
All right. I'm just, I'm so interested on as well. I get it because I was one of the players that I would reach out and I would come to you when I needed help. You would check in on me. I'd ask you, I'd be like, hey, can you text me at least once a month, just see how I'm doing?
Yeah.
Stuff like that. I'm wondering how when you walk into a clubhouse, and anybody that's ever been in a clubhouse knows that there is not one personality that runs in that clubhouse. There's, 30 guys and 15 coaches and, 10 front office people that all have a different personality and have different needs. How do you go around and approach each and every one of those? Because you got guys that'll come out and reach to you that, always need help. They're very attentive. And then you got guys that are probably really standoffish, but might actually need the help. And how do you kind of approach that and wade through a big league locker room like that?
Yeah. Um, Long time ago, I got the advice or I heard the saying of build relationships that can bear the weight of truth. And I think that's really important in coaching, right? Because coaching isn't always going to make you feel good, right? Sometimes there's some tough conversations or there's conversations that you have to face the reality that things aren't going good enough and you have to change what you do and you might not want to change that. And they're uncomfortable conversations and you have to be ready to have those. However, you also have to have the relationship and trust in place in order to talk about difficult things like that, right? And so I always took it upon myself that I should have some sort of relationship, some sort of established level of trust with everyone in the clubhouse. And so to your point, there were guys that I've worked with in the past that like don't really want to talk about mental performance or mental skills. And I never wanted to force anything on anyone. I didn't think that that would be an effective way to be helpful to them. I didn't think that would lead to productive conversations. But I wanted to at least be able to check in with every single guy in terms of just, hey, how are you? How are things? Know some details about their lives. How are things going with the kid that they have? How's the family? Things like that, so that they know that, hey, I care about you as a player and as a person. And then what I took it upon myself is, I like the analogy of like setting the table. I want to set the table and make the food on that table as enticing as possible. And I want you to know exactly what is on that table, right? What can you get from Marius? If you come to Marius and you want some help, these are the things that you can get, whether it's a text every month, whether it's a daily conversation, whether we're putting a number to the behavior that you're doing, whatever it is, you know that you can get this from Marius. And so I try to control what I can control, which is setting an enticing table, making sure you're aware of what's on that table. And then I will respect you as a Major League Baseball player to, if you want to come and utilize that stuff, great. I'm here for you. If not, great. I'm also still here for you, but it might look differently than my relationship with Troy or my relationship with someone else that we're doing a lot more active work. But I will always, no matter what, be there, support you, back you. And I hope that every player at least knows that much. And yeah, that's just the way that I feel like I need to approach a clubhouse.
I'm curious. There's three things in particular I just find so fascinating about your background. Baseball being one of them, Green Beret being the second, and swimming. And I think that if you look at those three things, they are so different, right? Green Beret, you're talking life or death, literally, in many, many situations. Baseball is almost certainly the most pressure-packed sport in terms of the failure that is embedded into the sport, that even the greatest are going to fail 70% of the time. The old cliche. Also, the fact you've got to get through so many levels just to even get to the very top. But I also feel like baseball has some similarities with swimming in that it is team oriented. And by the way, I think you're being very humble about your career. You were a walk-on who set 5 school records at the University of Chicago, which is pretty impressive. Um, it's a team sport like baseball is, but it's also so individual based because yes, you're pulling for each other at the same time. It is you who's out there, whether it's swimming, whatever stroke it is, whatever race it is, whatever relay it is individual based, just like when Troy is batting. So did you feel like because of that swimming background, maybe that actually helped you in that it is an oddly similar sport in terms of the individualization within a team compared to maybe like a football or basketball or something like that?
I've never thought of it that way. However, with you saying that, I do think about my career as a swimmer, and I loved relays. I loved relays because it had that even more of that team aspect, right? It wasn't just me. It was three other guys that I was swimming with and put together, like that was our result. And you couldn't do it on your own. And what I noticed about my performance when I look back at my 4 years of collegiate swimming, my best races always came on relays. And I think that actually formed a little bit of my beliefs and philosophies that I carried forward into baseball, where, you know, Troy knows we've had conversations about this with the team and the clubhouse of, you know, performing beyond yourself. Um, I feel like there were times when I would race on a relay that it would unlock a performance from me because I wasn't so worried about myself as an individual. And it made me go above and beyond because I wanted to perform so badly for the guys that I was racing with. Now, there's times where that can get in the way, right? Like you want to perform so badly for someone else that it almost like paralyzes you or makes you hesitant. But in those instances, it was a huge driving force for me and it helped me out a lot. And we've had conversations with baseball players about that where it's like, yes, being at the plate can be a very individual aspect, right? And you can start thinking about what you need to do, or you can start thinking about your stats. But oftentimes, if you put yourself in a position where you're putting the team first, sometimes that unlocks things in you individually that actually helps you be your best individual self. And having this trust and faith that if everyone is doing that up and down the lineup, you're putting the team in a great position, which then will help put you in a great position. And then it's this positive feedback loop where everyone is feeding off of each other, putting the team first, helping themselves be even better. And I think you saw a lot of that in our team last year.
Did you feel going from Green Beret to baseball, again, life or death, and as pressure packed as baseball is, it is a game. Was that like an adjustment at all for you in terms of approaching I don't want to say the seriousness, because I know obviously players, it is really serious when you struggle in anything, and I know how hard those guys could take it, but it is not life and death. Did you see a difference in maybe approaching different situations because of that differently in terms of the people you work with and those entities?
Yeah, I don't think there's any comparing of the two, right?
Yeah.
Between the mission set of Green Berets and the sport of baseball. That being said, I think early on in my pro baseball career, I realized that say you're in spring training and you're fighting to make the team, and you feel like you need to make the major league team in order to support your family or to continue your career. That is an incredible amount of stress because you feel like your livelihood is possibly threatened, your career is possibly threatened, your ability to provide for your family is possibly threatened. And we only know what we know, right? And so that level of stress, while not acutely life or death, is an incredible level of stress, right? And so having seen that firsthand, I think it goes back to our point of meeting players where they're at. I don't think there's a need to compare the two. It's just I need to meet this player where they're at, and they're incredibly stressed about what it is that they need to do or the consequences that they're about to face. So how do we help them manage that pressure? How do we help them rise up to the moment? How do we help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve? And I thought that was really interesting because I think from the outside it's easy to say, oh, the baseball players are not, they're not being shot at, they're not facing imminent death, um, and they're not, but the stress is there, and it can be an incredibly high level of stress. And so we want to make sure that we're working through that and preparing them for whatever it is that they need to do. Now, that being said, sometimes a level of perspective can be good, right? Maybe if certain individuals find that comparing themselves to other situations that they could find in helps them realize like, hey, I'm okay, like things are going to work out, and that's what they need to go out and perform their best. Other people want as much pressure as possible. They want that pressure of like, hey, my livelihood is at stake, and I need to show them what I've got, and that helps them perform. And so it's learning individual, learning what it is that they need in order to perform their best. Um, but it is, yeah, it's interesting to see how different people perceive that and how it impacts people differently.
Scott, do you have any more of, I'm going to put it on the tag of more of a serious question because I have some more interesting questions, but they're not on the serious
Now,
topic. I'm
I have
wondering if,
one more.
okay, you got perfect. You asked that. Yes.
All right. My last serious question. Um, I thought it was really interesting how much you talked about you learning from seventh graders when you did Teach for America. I have friends who did it. By the way, they loved it. To me, you just I mentioned all this stuff about stress, and I think that is almost the perfect segue to Teach for America because, I mean, A, it's a really stressful profession, but B, you're dealing with a lot of disadvantaged students and families and whatnot, and maybe not amazing economic areas. I know Detroit, I think, is where you were for Teach for America. So, what are some of those things that maybe you picked up in those stressful situations from those students and their families, and how did you maybe take that into this career that you went on post teaching?
Yeah, I've always said that seventh graders, and I believe this particularly seventh graders, can be the most brutally honest people on earth. Um, I will never forget when I would walk into a classroom and I was just stressed about the lesson plans and things coming up and the grad school I was going through and the coaching and um, my kids would have zero hesitancy to just raise their hand. And I thought it was some sort of content question about science. And a kid would raise their hand and they'd say, Mr. Alexa, you don't look so good today. I was like, wow, thanks. I appreciate that. But I honestly think it was such a good like leadership lesson that you needed to show up as your genuine, authentic self because they were going to see through any sort of BS or any sort of facade that you're trying to put up with. Um, if you try to be a disciplinarian in the classroom when that wasn't your style, it wouldn't work. They wouldn't listen to you. Like you try to be this hard person, this hard teacher of laying down the law, and that wasn't me. That wasn't who I am, and it didn't work for me. And they would respond in that way. Like it was such a great feedback loop where they're just like, "No, we're not going to listen to you." But if I found a way of communicating with them or establishing rules in the classroom or establishing a culture where, hey, this is why we're doing these things. This is the standard, and I'm going to hold you to that standard. It worked a lot better, and so I think that really informed me as I went on to coach Division I swimming, and then coach like regular Army, and then special operations, and then Major League Baseball players of this lesson of just being authentic to yourself, being genuine, making sure that you're showing up for the right reasons, and just like seventh graders, like special operations soldiers and Major League Baseball players are going to sniff out if you're being fake, if you're trying to show up in a way that you're not really. They're going to see through that, especially over a 162 game season. I think uh, the beautiful part of that is that there are so many opportunities to keep showing up as yourself. Um, and if you don't, you have another opportunity the next day or even within the day to kind of correct that and course correct and get back on the same page. But it is always wild to think about how those lessons started in a tiny little classroom in Detroit, Michigan, with a bunch of seventh graders that had no problem on calling me out on whatever they wanted to.
I love that. That is such like a good nugget to hear
It's
about.
so true
Oh,
too, by the way.
seventh
It's
grader.
amazing.
I know.
But it also,
Seventh
I mean,
graders.
it also taught me about like just the value of little things. Like, for example, I think they had some free time in class. We finished up our work, and so I gave them some time to, have some free time at their tables. And I think a student drew me a picture, and it was like really funny. It was like me in a tie and says Mr. Alexa, and um, they thought I went clubbing on the weekends, which I thought it was hilarious. And like they also this kid particularly, he thought that I owned like a very big boat for some reason. So
Oh.
it was like Mr. Alexa, and then it had my big boat that I definitely didn't own. And he gave it to me, and so I put it up behind my desk. I didn't think too much of it, and I just kind of plastered it on the wall because I appreciated him, handing it over to me. That meant so much to the kid. The kid at the time wasn't someone who was necessarily that engaged in my class. Didn't necessarily want to listen, but after I did that, the relationship completely changed because he saw that I value that. I cared about him and his work in my classroom, and it was really cool to see because I didn't think anything of it. And then once I put that up, all the others so all of a sudden like all the other kids saw that, and next thing you know, I had a wall just completely filled with like different drawings or whatever because everyone wanted to, like, they saw that like if they gave something to Mr. Alexa, like he would value it, he put it up. um, and I thought that was a really cool part of being a teacher and being in the classroom. And I also never got used to being called Mr. Alexa because I was like, that's my dad. I don't know why you guys are calling me that. But also, you can't have like seventh graders calling you Marius or like calling you by your first name. So we lived with it.
That's so funny. I remember when I was substitute teaching as well, I worked in the same building as my dad, and so we were both Mr. Johnston, and they looked at me and they were like, "You're not Mr. Johnston. You're not, you know, working teaching history." I'm like, "I know. I'm another Mr. There
Yeah.
there can be two of us."
Yep. Yep.
But oh, that's great. So I do have a different. I'm gonna segue into a different conversation here. I know nothing about swimming. Genuinely,
Mm.
I know absolutely nothing. What was your events? And when you said you were coaching, what was like your, what run me through like what a practice looks like? Because I genuinely have no idea what swimming on a team looks like.
Yeah. So I was a sprinter. So my events were the 50 freestyle, 100 freestyle, and then I would be on any relays that would utilize freestyle. Um, However, I would joke about it. And by the end of my swimming career, when it was like our first team meeting and we stood up and said what events we did, I would stand up and I would say, I'm a sprinter, but occasionally I swim the longer distance events like the 50 and 100. Um, because the shorter the race was, the better it was for me. My ideal event is a 12 and a half, which is not even the full length of a pool. It
Oh,
is halfway of the
halfway.
25 yards. That's my ideal race. But what a swim practice looks like, usually practices would be an hour and a half to 2 hours long. You'd end up doing some warm up, some warm up sets in the beginning of the practice. Then you get into some main work, whether that was like aerobic work on that day. For sprinters, it might be short sprints with a lot of rest. Um, and then you'd sprinkle in some technique work in there before you'd wind it down and cool it down for the day. Um, Usually, like, there's all sorts of different training philosophies. Um, there's also, you're split into groups, so typically it's like a sprint group, a mid distance group, and a long distance group, depending on your events, depending on what you need from training. There's philosophies that are like, hey, swim at speed, at top speed as much as you can with plenty of rest. There's other philosophies where it's, hey, let's get as much yardage as we can and swim as much as we can in the short amount of time. Um, and so over the years, the training has gotten much more technical and fine tuned. Um, Back in the day, it was a lot more just kind of put your head down and swim, and that's kind of what I came up with, which again for a short sprinter is probably not the most ideal, but we made it work.
All right.
I actually was a swimming and diving SID for a short time,
Really?
in Western Illinois, where I did like football, basketball broadcasting, and they were like, "Well, you could also be an SID. We'll give you a little bit more money." And I was like, "Okay, that sounds great." So I did swimming and diving, and so I know a tiny bit about it.
Yeah,
Um,
more than Troy.
Yeah.
more more than Troy, more than Troy. Still not very much, but hopefully enough to
Yeah,
write a recap every, couple weeks or so. Um,
yeah.
we were talking before this episode about your Chicago Cubs fandom 2016 World Series, what that meant to you. And I'm curious, you had challenged us a little bit to maybe dive deeper into this. Your swimming background took place very close to Michael Phelps and his dominance in the Olympics. So I was curious if was that bigger to you than a Cubs World Series as a swimmer, seeing what Michael Phelps did on a world stage that nobody had ever done in literally the history of the world?
I So actually, Michael Phelps had signed our door in our locker room at University of Chicago.
Oh,
He
so
swam
cool.
some sort of meet there, I think, and he had the door signed. Um, Short answer, no. And I'm sorry if that's disappointing. The Cubs World Series as a fan was incredible, and it was redemption for 2003. Um, Funny enough, if you guys remember the iconic relay where USA came back and beat the French when it looked like they were going to lose, and it preserved Michael Phelps's race to 8 gold medals. I actually missed that race. I remember I had a group of high school friends that were watching the race uh, at a basement of one of our friends' house, and I walked in through the door as everyone was celebrating like crazy because of the race. And I believe I was late because I was coming from coaching practice.
Oh,
So I was doing some coaching. Uh, I coached when I was in high school and in college, and I missed possibly the most iconic swimming race, and if not one of the most iconic Olympic moments because I was busy doing the thing, which I feel like there's some beautiful irony. Um, I think as a swimmer, you saw Michael Phelps and you saw it inspiring to see the things that he was doing. I think also just I perceived myself at a completely different level that it was almost like hard for me to relate to him and the things that he was doing. And so I think I drew inspiration from other sources as opposed to this like godlike figure that was winning 8 gold medals at the highest level of competition.
Totally understandable.
awesome.
No one could
Yes.
relate to what he did. I have one more question, Troy. I don't know if you have many other ones.
I'm good. I like it. I like it.
I do not know anybody, I don't think, who speaks Lithuanian, but you do,
Mm.
according to your LinkedIn. And I'm presuming potentially has something to do with your background. How did you learn that? Is that a family related? Do you practice it still to keep in touch? Like, give us a little bit of a glimpse, if you can, about Lithuanian because it's such a unique skill to have.
Yeah, it was the first language that I learned. I actually
Wow.
learned Lithuanian first, and then learned English afterwards. My grandparents are the ones that came over from Lithuania to America. They were running from the Iron Curtain, and so there was this push to keep the culture, the language, the country alive over here in America because we didn't know if it would continue to exist in Europe beneath the Iron Curtain. And so both of my parents are born here in the States, but they also spoke Lithuanian first. And then I was obviously born here. I was born in Chicago, but also learned Lithuanian first. And so the Lithuanian community was a big part of my growing up. I went to Lithuanian school on Saturdays through high school, where we would work on things like grammar and history and literature and cultural things. I would go to Lithuanian summer camps, and it was really cool to have um, kind of that part of my development and growing up. I took a lot of pride in it because it is something that made me feel very unique. And then I think as I grew older, I just appreciated how that impacted my perspective. And also, I think it's just a great skill to have of, being able to speak multiple languages and exposed to different cultures. And I think there's probably a part of that that then tied into baseball, where it's like, hey, with our Latin guys, it's like I didn't have to assimilate into a culture. Like I was born here, grew up here, like I was fine, but I was exposed to knowing that there's this whole different culture, having the Lithuanian culture. And so while it didn't, I don't think it makes me be able to relate to what our Latin guys go through as baseball players coming into a completely different country and facing trying to play a sport at the highest level with a language that they didn't grow up with. I think there's enough there that I can um, maybe relate a little bit better or have more empathy and understanding for the things that they go through.
That's awesome. I actually didn't know that about you. I'm glad Scott dug that up. That's fantastic.
Scott did
Uh,
his research.
Scott did his research.
We
I
didn't
could have
have the
done
prior
better. I'm sorry.
relationship that you and Troy have, so I had to try to contribute in some way.
I love it.
This
Scott,
was
do you want to
amazing. Thank you.
this was yeah, this was I
So
can't
can I flip the tables a little bit?
go for it.
Okay. So one of one of my highlights, and Troy, you don't have to speak on this if you don't want to. We can cut it out. One of the highlights of my career with the Miami Marlins came very early on in my career, and it was spring training of 2023. I had joined the Marlins 2 weeks late. So not only did I get no ramp up, but all of a sudden, as someone that has zero baseball background, I just kind of got thrown in the fire and was like, go do this thing. And it was a game at Fort Myers. We were playing the Boston Red Sox, and I'm hanging out in the dugout. And I remember having a conversation with this young whippersnapper named Troy Johnston. And we had that conversation. And the reason why it's like a career highlight, because at the time, I I thought I was just having a conversation. Like there was no pressure to it. It didn't feel like we were doing any sort of work. But then in knowing Troy and my relationship with Troy over the next 3 years, I started to realize how impactful that conversation was for Troy, which then started to make that moment that much more impactful to me. And I started like from that conversation, I realized that this is why we maybe don't take ourselves so seriously, but we take our work very seriously. And why you show up the best you can in every single moment. And when someone comes to you and wants to talk to you, you stay present. You don't rush it. You don't like try to move on to the next thing because you never know how that is going to play out. And so I am curious to hear from Troy's perspective, uh, just about that conversation, how it impacted you, what you thought of it, kind of how it drove your career from that point forward.
I remember that day very distinctly because I remember it was so hot that we had to all lay towels on the top because we were like burning our arms on the dugout railing. But the way that it impacted me was it opened up a different view of how I wanted to approach my life and how I wanted to approach baseball. And, I talked about it earlier in the interview, but you talked about I have my degree, I have a family, I have different job opportunities, I have all this kind of stuff. Like, why, you talked about it before. Some guys like want all the pressure. Some guys need to think about something else outside of it. And you talked about why, if you have so many good things going on in your life, are you only focusing on the negative? Why are you only focusing on the bad things that have happened to you in your career, the things that really haven't been showing up in your goals and how it's working out? And we talked about one specific thing, which I have written in my notebook every year since we met, is finding out your why. Why are you doing this? Why do you show up to the field every day? Why do you show up for your family? Why do you wake up in the morning? Why, what is your drive? And I have sometimes it changes, sometimes it stays the same, sometimes it transforms into something else. But that was my big takeaway from our conversation is you taught me how to have a why, have something to work for, have something that you wake up for every day, something that drives you, the pursuit of happiness, the pursuit of making those around you having an impact in their lives. And so finding those little ways, you opened up a whole new view for me because at that point I was really struggling mentally. That's I don't you were one of the people that I really opened up to as much as I could. And you taught me so many good, healthy skills on that, how I can open up to other people and, take the positive and leave the negative as much as I can. But that conversation really sparked how I view the world and how I view my life and how I want to live it. And so that's really the coolest thing to hear is that that was a career highlight for you because that was a career highlight for me too. So I'm glad that we got to share that moment and we got to kind of dig deeper than just, surface level. Hey, I'm Troy. Hi, I'm Marius. Well, what do you do here? That kind of stuff. We really got into it right away, probably within the first 10 minutes. And
Yeah.
so,
I just got goosebumps with you explaining that. And I
if,
want to point out two things. One, it's a testament to you and who you are, right? Because you were open and willing to open yourself up in that way, right? The way I remember it is you came up to me. I like it's not like I sought you out, and honestly I didn't know who you are because I didn't know who anyone was on the Marlins. I was like just getting to know everyone. And but you came up and you started the conversation, right? And so that's a testament to you and having that desire to learn from anyone, right? Anyone that you can learn of, you're going to seek that out. The second thing that strikes me is that you it was an open-ended conversation, right? You continuously write in your notebook to find your why. And so instead of latching onto, I need to have this specific why and needs to carry through the next year, 2 years, 3 years, whatever it is, you're constantly looking through the lens of like, this is my why now. And then checking in on that, reflecting on it, seeing if it still holds true. And if you need to change it, you change it, right? And I think that's one of the reasons why that conversation stuck out to me is because if I tried to tell you what your why should be, or if I tried to tell you what you needed to do in order to reignite your spark in baseball, I think that conversation would have fallen flat. And I don't think I would remember it. And I don't think you would remember it. Who knows if we'd still be sitting here. But because we had it as an open-ended conversation, open-ended question of like, what if you just try to find your why? What if you tried to tap into your why as you went about your work as a baseball player, as a husband, as a father? What would that look like? You were able to take that and transform that and apply that to everything that you did. And again, that's a testament to you and the work that you've put in. I was just kind of helping facilitate that. And that's what I love about my role is like it's truly support. Like you
Mhm.
guys are the ones putting in the work. You guys are the ones that apply these lessons. You guys are the ones that have to go up to the plate and actually do the thing. But I am always more than happy to be at your side while you do the thing. And so, yeah, no, I think back to that conversation a lot. I love it. And it helped me as a coach as well. So appreciate you.
Well, Marius, thank you so much for being here with us. I appreciate you talking to us. Again, you have not, I don't think you can comprehend how many people you have impacted, even just your stories and even the fans that are going to hear these stories and then they might take something away from it. I'm hoping one of them goes home and tries to figure out their why, you know, tries to build off of kind of what we're talking about here. But I can't thank you enough for everything you've done for me and you've done for the baseball community. And not only that, your time in Chicago, your time with the military. I mean, it's been unbelievable to be get to know you and know what you're about A little ad for everybody out there that's listening. Marius is a free agent currently, so he is taking on clients. If you guys need any help with mental skills, mental performance, you have a kid, somebody in, little league, somebody in high school, somebody in college, somebody that's even at the pro level that needs help, I cannot recommend Marius enough. He has helped me so much with everything that I've done. I will drop potentially if you guys need something, DM us and maybe we'll pass along his contact information so that you can get set up with him. He is a wonderful asset to use not only in sports but in daily life. Marius, I can't thank you enough for being on the show today. It was well worth it. It was well worth the wait to finally get you on. Guys, this was Turn Two with Scott and Troy. You can catch us wherever you get your podcasts. You can use Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Don't forget that we are wrapping up the end of the 2025 season for our podcast. So we only got a couple episodes left. Make sure you tune in, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, everybody.